Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name's Keith Reed, and I'm the Chief Executive of Parent Infant Foundation. And it's a pleasure to welcome you to the first 1001 Days Lunchtime webinar. It's held broadly every month around the same time, same part of the month. And just before we start, if you don't know already, the first 1001 Days movement is a group of over 200 organisations and professionals working together to campaign around the importance of babies' emotional wellbeing and development. And you can learn more about the 1001 Days movement at Parent Infant Foundation website. So for this month, I'm joined by Christian Bunting, who's the director of Bradford Birth to 19, and his colleague Andrea Layzell, who's the national project lead on 50 Things to Do Before You Are 5. And they've excitingly just launched another product this week, which is 50 Things to Do during primary as well, which is fantastic. So for those that haven't attended before, I'm going to hand over very shortly to Christian and Andrea. There is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So during the presentation, please type in your questions and we'll collate them and ask them to our panelists at the end of their presentation. And finally, before I get underway and hand across, if there are any topics or guests that you, first 1001 Day movement members, think should be invited to future webinars, please let my colleague Ben know, and I'll put that in the chat function a little bit later. So without any further ado, can I hand across to Christian and Andrea just to talk us through this fantastic piece of work. So thank you.
It's going to be Andrea who's kicking things off this afternoon and sharing a presentation, but just to welcome everybody. I'm Chris Bunting. I'm the director of Bradford Birth to 19. Unsurprisingly, I'm based in Bradford. And Bradford Birth to 19 comprises a teacher training function. We run the Bradford Birth to 19 School Centre for Initial Teacher Training. Do a lot of work around school and setting improvement, particularly in the early years, but also at primary quite a lot as well. And I work with the Centre for Applied Education Research. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, and do work around that connectivity between health and education. 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 and 50 Things Primary, very much the jewel in our crown. Really excited to be able to talk to everybody about that this afternoon. And I'm going to hand over to our project lead, a national project lead, Andrea Layzell, who's got a presentation to share, but she'll introduce herself first.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you for that welcome, Keith. It is delightful to be here, and I can't think of very many better ways to spend a lunchtime. My name's Andrea Layzell, as Christian and Keith have already said. I'm the national project lead. And really my passions and enthusiasms have always been for the very youngest members of our society, as well as working in a respectful way with parents. So as you might imagine, if you're at all familiar with 50 Things to Do Before You're 5, this is just the very best project that I could possibly work on. We're going to bore you a little bit with a PowerPoint presentation. I've lived and breathed 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 for about 5 years now. So I sometimes forget what I was meant to say. So the PowerPoint really is as much for me as for people on the call. I hope it's something useful for you all. And Christian and I are going to swap around a little bit, but not in a way that's at all distracting, I hope. So a brief introduction really to the conception of 50 Things to Do Before You're 5. We are based in a maintained nursery school that has several outstanding judgments against it. And one of our major passions and commitments is to work in a respectful way with parents whose children attend. We're a fairly large, I suppose, maintained nursery school. We have a baby room, We have two 2-year-old rooms and 2 nursery classrooms, but we also offer community-based activities, drop-ins, parent and toddler groups, and work very much alongside parents to work towards the very best outcome for children in our area. We're based in an area of some disadvantage. We have a very mixed community. If you talked to me perhaps 5 years ago, I would have said it was largely South Asian heritage families. We've since had a significant increase in other members of community. So we have Roma families that live in the area, we have Syrian families who live in the area, some Eastern European, Polish families. So it's more mixed. But regardless of the parents who use our nursery provision, our ethos is based on that belief that every parent wants better for their children. And with that in mind, the then executive head of the school recognised that many children were coming into our nursery and into our stay and plays with somewhat limited experiences outside of a loving home and the provision that they attended. So with that in mind, we thought that it would be useful to create some sort of a fully accessible list of some sorts of really basic ideas of things that can be undertaken at home and around the local area that were accessible to everybody, but actually had a significant impact on outcomes for those children. So we developed a list really of 50 low-cost, no-cost activities. Following a grant application to Big Change, which you can see at the bottom right of our screen, we realised that we could actually, rather than just creating this for our families, we could actually reach much wider across the Bradford district. And so we held consultation events in each of the, can't remember whether it's 34 or 36 wards, but we had at least one event in each of those wards. We spoke to parents, we spoke to grandparents, we spoke to professionals and asked the question, what activity should every child in our district have access to before they go into reception class that will support them, not in school readiness necessarily, but readiness to embrace every opportunity that life might present to them. And so we came up with 534 original ideas, which doesn't roll off the tongue and makes a complicated list of some size. So we whittled that down to 50. We looked at the 5 years that we were aiming to support children with. We looked across a broad curriculum, if you want, of activities and areas of interest that we thought were really important, including children's health. We thought about children's diet. Certainly in our local area, we've got a big use of takeaways in terms of feeding a family. And I think very often for communities who were on fixed incomes, then that at least gives them an idea of this is how we can feed the family, and we know that we'll eat it all, there'll be no waste, and we know exactly how much it's going to cost us. But of course, that's not particularly good for our children. We know that there's too much traffic on our roads. We know that we've got an issue with the quality of air in and around Girlington where we're based. So we wanted to encourage children to be out and about, to embrace that idea of locating themselves, not just in the community, but with the earth, and seeing the wonderful green spaces that we've got that surround the Bradford district. So we came up with 50 activities, all of which are low cost or no cost, because it was very important to us that this offer was a universal offer. This should be something that could be embraced by every family in our district. And of course, because we've got significant areas of disadvantage in our area, it means that they had to be low cost or free in order for that universality to be available to all the families. We looked at, there's mention of 20 weeks post-conception, right the way through to age 5. And they're really fundamental, simple, straightforward ideas. They involve going out and accessing your local park, having a woodland wander, thinking about writing a shopping list together and going out and buying interesting food that perhaps is a little bit different for a picnic that could be sociable, that might involve friends or neighbours. All of these activities and the offer of 50 things are free at the point of access. We're a not-for-profit organisation, even though we're based in a school. Any profits that we make from 50 things are ploughed back in. So it's continually developing. And that development comes at the suggestion and feedback from experts, from parents, and from partners across the British Isle. We'll talk about some of the partners that we're already engaged with, which means that 50 Things Before 5 is available in a localised offer across 20 local authority areas now. We expanded last month, as Keith said, to 50 Things Primary for children aged 5 to 11 years, which is a slight move away in that the app that we offer with Before 5 is very much parent facing, but we accept that by the time children get to the end of their primary phase of education, the chances are they'll have access to a smart device, they're growing in their independence, and it might be that they want to look at the activities that are available and make those decisions themselves. So who is 50 Things for? Well, it's for parents, as I say. I will draw your attention to the photograph on that slide of Isla and her great-grandma. And Isla is the baby of one of our enthusiasts who works with us in Bradford. It's her third baby. And family are very important to us. So we also emphasise the fact that extended family members have a major role to play in welcoming babies into the family and into the community and making them welcome, making them feel loved, making sure that they're part of their growing ability to communicate and to have conversations. It's a tool that supports the aims and objectives of local authority and health teams. So we work with health visitors, with librarians, family support workers, early help officers, children's centre teams, parent and toddler group and baby group workers. We like to say 50 Things is not a new piece of work for anybody. It is, however, a tool that can be embraced into a repertoire of other tools that support all of these people who are working with our very youngest children and their families to support their agenda. It also works for school staff to support parental engagement and developing the home learning environment with some really quite basic activities which I've previously mentioned. I'm going to go on to the next slide now and pass over to Christian.
It's been an extraordinary period of growth, really, the past 4 to 5 years now. And as Andrea mentioned, we started out with an offer which was reflecting outstanding practice in our school. And we were convinced about the worth of the 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 approach. And very quickly, other people became convinced with our approach too. So 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 in Bradford has now been replicated with a similar national template, similar local offer across all of these different local authority areas. And even though they are typically local authority offers with the logos there, with the exception of the government of Jersey, in truth, in those areas, it's often a joined up approach between different strategic partners in local areas who are embracing and working and connected to the 50 Things approach. And those different organisations have different priorities. They have their own different needs in their locality. The social inclusion needs of the government of Jersey are very different to that of Oldham and Bradford, or inner city London in Southwark. And the different teams, while embracing proportional universalism, those different teams in those local areas use 50 things to do before you're 5 for different types of targeted approaches. Some of them are trying to use it to drive forward public health, really, to improve health outcomes for children under 5, concerned about childhood obesity, coronary and respiratory health, early onset diabetes and issues related to do with diet. Some of them concerned about the issues related to early childhood mental well-being, and also, you know, very specific issues that are you know, presenting as concerns to them, might be fine and gross motor skill development, reflecting about what needs to be done in the very early years because of trends that they're seeing within the EYFS profiling and within the, you know, GLD measures that are coming back from the end of reception. In other areas like Sheffield City Council, it's very much around a family learning project where they're using 50 things and the wonderful opportunity to be able to co-construct that local offer with your community as a way of building bridges between disjointed local communities, drawing in Sheffield's circumstances, new migrant families and white working class communities who, you know, in North Sheffield, you know, have not traditionally cooperated or perhaps, you know, worked together in the best way. And we've used 50 things as a kind of like a glue, as a project, as a celebration of what can be achieved together. We look around our different areas and people are using it with enthusiasm for different purposes. Just go back to the previous slide, Andrea. For me, the obvious thing that comes out of it is that once you have an offer in one local area, like in Bradford, very quickly have we reached out and drawn in the whole of the West Yorkshire local authorities. So we've now got Leeds and Wakefield and Kirklees and Calderdale. In the east of England, you know, with some fantastic work happening in Peterborough and Cambridgeshire. Very soon after that picked up Bedfordshire and Norfolk and Suffolk, and reaching down to you know, to places like Hertfordshire, West Berkshire, you know, and other areas. Once you get one, you then move into another area really quite quickly in a local area, because word of mouth has allowed that, I suppose, you know, the 50 things message to spread. We're not a super commercial organization. We're not backed up with remarkable slick marketing. You know, people get involved in our project because they believe in what they do and because they hear other people telling them how good the 50 things to do before your 5 approach is. Thanks, Andrea. So as I started to describe, you know, 50 things, it's an offer to families, but it's an offer more broadly to those who care for very young children. And it works very best in our local areas, respectful of those different priorities, but it works very best when we've got an integrated offer. You know, one of the things that's become quite apparent to us as we've worked with different local areas across the UK is that the early years sector can become quite siloed. You sometimes seem to get public health working to a different set of priorities, similar to, but not exactly the same, as people concerned about school readiness, as people concerned about early years quality improvement of settings, and sometimes those agendas don't connect. They don't connect and they're not the same thing, but everything is connected in the early years. And there is a huge benefit with something like 50 things in providing a common curriculum, providing a common kind of like offer for families, which all of those different teams with their important individual priorities can point to as the same way and the same, I suppose, the same method of reaching out to families. And we see different people taking the lead in those different areas. One of our most recent partners in Bedfordshire is actually a multi-academy trust. Very soon after they decided to move ahead with 50 Things for the needs of their communities, the local authority joined on board. And we're really excited by the Start for Life initiative and the emergence of the integrated care offer as providing new opportunities for kind of a joined up approach. I'm just going to say something a little bit about the research base to 50 Things to Do Before You're 5. And I think that I suppose the thing I'd start with here is that we're, you know, it appears to be unanswerable. We've never been challenged at any one point, and we've only received positive support about the research backing for 50 Things to Do Before You're 5. That by doing new activities on a regular basis with your family, wrapped up in a serve and return conversation, you're likely to see improvement in early language development. Equally, by doing those activities, you're likely to see improvements in early health outcomes, in self-regulation, metacognition, and you know, in terms of young childhood well-being as well. That case is very, very strong, and we are seeing evidence in our settings and in the schools that we're working with of notable, you know, signs of impact, increased parental confidence in knowing what to do and how to play with their children. We're seeing confidence from practitioners improve as well, and we're starting to see the signs of improvements in early language outcomes. Data around this is tricky at the moment, particularly because in one direction we're making really good progress, and then we fight against the other pressures, which have been the impact of the COVID pandemic, creating kind of like conditions around social isolation, which actually mitigates our encouragement of children to go out and play in the outdoors and at home. But it looks really promising. The bedrock for our research in Bradford is the work of the Centre for Applied Education Research, led by Professor Mark Mon-Williams, and the Bradford Institute for Health Research, led by Professor John Wright. And together, those two organisations support the Born in Bradford cohort data study, which is the largest in Europe and provides a remarkable opportunity to evaluate our impact. In Bradford, that Born in Bradford cohort study is supported by what we call the Connected Bradford data sharing protocols, where we can map and follow the progress of children over time, not just in terms of their health and education, but we can also pick up data around relative socioeconomic disadvantage, vehicle admissions, housing quality, the criminal justice system. So we can start to tease out trends and look for impacts in a way which is really quite remarkable and attracting kind of international interest. And Andrea. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is 50 Things to Do Before You're 5? We've kind of like hinted about it, and we've got a screen to show here. It is a multi-platform offer. It is a smartphone app on the iPhone devices, Apple devices, the iPhone and similar tablets, and for Android. It's also a poster and a website and social media campaign support within localities. Andrew, if you just drop the screens at the moment. So when I'm talking about the poster, we have it here, and here's an example of it. It folds out into an A3 poster, and I just want to point to you an example of the local element of this, and I hope that comes quite clearly. That young man, Adam, For anybody who knows Bradford, that's really very clearly Bradford stone. That's what it looks like round here. And that's a Bradford terraced house. Now, if you go to Leeds, you'll see red brick. And if you go to, if you go to other areas, you'll see a kind of like a different kind of stone. In Bradford, you see this kind of quarried stone, and it goes, because of the impact of the Industrial Revolution, it goes darker because of smog and soot over the years. It's just what happens. Now, for everybody in Bradford, they'll know that's Bradford. And that young South Asian Heritage Fellow, Adam, is tangibly a Bradford lad, and people will see that for what it is. You'll go into other examples there of our materials, and you'll see time and time again a local offer. So for our areas in Bradford, they can see kids like their kids in that app. It's not something that's kind of foisted upon them by somebody from outside. Colleagues on the call today may sympathise with what I'm going to describe now. There are loads of communities in Bradford who've got a considerable experience of having people coming from outside this city to improve them, and to improve their local communities with an offer from somewhere else, which is not it's not respectful of who they are and doesn't engage them in an opportunity to be part of a solution, to be part of that progress. So our 50 things to do before your 5 offer, and here I'm going to show the card packs, and there's number 2. Where am I? This card pack, another one of the resources, is also available to families. We felt it was going to be really useful in the first instance to have something like a card pack like that to be given in to settings, perhaps places where smartphone technology was not appropriate to use, and we have found it to be really useful there. But we've also found it to be really interesting and a popular offer for families too. These 2 particular kind of like examples of our printed materials act as a visual timetable for young children as well. They may not have the language skills to, at an early age to be able to describe precisely what it is and what they want to do, but they can certainly point. And if you put a poster like that on the fridge door or on the kitchen door at a child's height, they can just go and point at one of those things and say that's what they want to do. And so you've got another, another particular one of our things there, mini artists, number 20, and they, you can just point at that. As a young child, I want to go out there with a piece of chalk and draw on that wall. And so in our localities, it's their children, different photographs in different areas, their museums, their galleries, their wild spaces, their parks, their bridges. And in that locality, you get wonderful opportunities for co-construction with our communities. So it's a really lovely thing to do, is to be able to talk to grandparents and talk to mums and dads about the best bridges under which you can play poo sticks, the best places in the area to have to make an echo when you're going to go and shout. And that's not information that's available on any website anywhere. It's probably not held where the best places are to see the crocuses in bloom, or the trees which go red in the autumn, or the best places to go and harvest your conkers or acorns or whatever it might be. And in our local area, that's what we do with our family. The local areas do with their families. They work with them to build that local content. It's a national template. The 50 things are the same, except for one, which is a special thing for your local area. But the content is very, very localized. If you just bring back the screen, Andrea, where we're at. The other thing to say very specifically about the 50 things offer is that within the smartphone app, there is the opportunity not just to look at the things, find out what to do, where to do it, how to do it, to look at some videos illustrating what you should do, to see a selection of stories to share, to have a look at ages and stages, words to use with your children as they grow older. It's not just that a wonderful treasure trove of information for parents, but they can also use the app to store photographs of their children doing the 50 things over the years, returning to revisit an experience and talk about. It's a really important part of childhood development. And it also allows us and the local area to put on lists of events that families can go and attend, you know, run by the museum service or whatever it might be, which connect to those individual 50 things. And the last thing I'd say about the that offer is that it gives us the capacity to be able to measure engagement and you know, track that. When a family signs up for 50 things to do before you're 5, they're given the option, which around about half of our families do, of submitting their fine postcode into the app. It doesn't log them individually as an individual person, it logs the device. And what we can do is, by comparing that postcode data against locally held IDACI or IMDR data sets of relative socioeconomic deprivation, we can look at which parts of our local communities are engaging in 50 things. We can see who's engaging, where they downloaded it, where they live, what things they're doing, and what things they're not doing. So in Bradford, we can discover that nobody in that community goes or is saying that they go to a museum. Now, the museum can do something about that. They can take the museum to that locality. If you're finding that, you know, there aren't children going to a park or going for a walk in the woods, then our local services, our health offer, our local community offer, our volunteering community sector can do something about that. They can run activities, and that's what we do in Bradford, you know, in working particularly with some of our most underprivileged communities, to be able to support them, to give parents the confidence to engage with our offer. Andrea. So last bit of content for me for a little while is on the learning that we've I suppose that we've found from 50 things. Our original assumption is that, you know, it's a modern thing. We'll put it on a smartphone and our families will engage with that because they're on the phone all the time. They're often, you know, using a phone, so that's going to be the right place to do it. We'll grab a hold of the families where they are. And we were right with that. Lots of our families really do engage with it through the smartphone offer. But we're mindful of the digital divide. We're mindful of issues around access. We're mindful of unequal access with it between mums and dads to smartphone technology. And we're finding, actually, as well as the app, many families like to use the website, and very, very popular are our A2 posters, our A5 card packs. We also learned very quickly that having an app that doesn't use data, it's not requiring you to roam, it's there on your app. You need data to get the app, but you don't need data to use the app. And that's important for where issues of cost are paramount for families. We find, however, profoundly that where we get the most impact is when it's a supported offer, when it's supported by people working in health, people working within family sector, within social care, within local authorities, and when it's being supported by schools and settings. I'll pass on to Andrea again.
Thank you. And you'll see that that final point on that slide is that peer-to-peer support is very well received. And part of that peer support in Bradford anyway is that we have a group of advocates who are largely young parents, not exclusively, but largely. I say young parents, parents of young children. And we wondered about what we would call this group, because we recognised that I know all sorts of things about 2-year-olds and around that age, and I can talk with some authority about the research, and I lack conviction if I'm talking to somebody who's a real parent of a real 2-year-old who's going to take one look at me and think, it's years since you've had a disturbed night's sleep with a toddler who's fractious and going to have you first thing in the morning feeling really quite overwhelmed by the whole experience. And they would be right. So we gathered together people who were interested in supporting the project by going out, talking to other parents from a very personal perspective, giving support to download the app or talk about very simple ideas about activities. Now, one of those, that group of people who we call our enthusiasts, because that's the qualification that you need, is Sophie's mum. And we recognised that tummy time, for all sorts of reasons in terms of baby's health, is really quite important. But we were also very aware of the parents of relatively young babies who were saying that actually they weren't terribly comfortable with tummy time. And Sophie's mum very kindly pulled together some photographs that she'd gathered and shared the strategy. So this is a video that we've included in the app. We have quite a few videos because lots of our parents told us that actually we want to see what that might look like. So we are constantly working to increase that. And if we can give that message from somebody who is offering it to their peers, we find it's really important. The other reason, of course, for sharing this video is that I think it's really important that we bring babies and young children into the room where they're being discussed. And this is the best way that I can do it. So just a couple of minutes with this one.
When Sophie was really little, this is what tummy time used to look like, really. She'd be lying on our chest or on our tummies and just sort of getting that experience. And then sometimes we'd prop her up so that she could get a better look at things. We used to use a lot of black and white images. Sophie really likes balls, so quite often we put balls in front of her or hang them from her play gym, just so that she could start to be interested by different things and reach out for them. This Sophie absolutely loves, and she still plays with this today, even though she's almost 8 months. It's just one of those emergency blankets. It's very shiny, and so she's staring at it for ages. Really simple things you have lying around, like books. This one, with it having the black background and lots of different dots, she absolutely loves looking at that. Again, another ball, especially because this is red, it really stands out and captures vision. So, you know, if it's something that's really exciting, it means that they'll stay on the tummy for a little bit longer. Little and often is best, and I would never keep her on a tummy if she started to get upset. We sometimes put lots of the same colour all together. This was a red colour basket, so just her toys that we had, and she liked exploring them. And quite often we'll do a circle of toys, so it means that there's lots of different toys around her, and whichever captures her attention, she'll then start to reach out towards. I like to expose her to things outside as well as inside, and this is her exploring the grass outside. It was very spiky because the sun has really dried it out, and here she is with this is just a cushion from the living room, which is very velvety and soft, so she liked touching that and exploring that. When we went on a little walk, we gathered some flowers, just some wildflowers, and put them in a bag of water, and then lay her on a tummy, and she liked touching it. Had a bit more energy this day, so I got a hoop and I just went around the house. This is one of those body wash things, and I just attached them to a hoop, and she loves exploring all the different textures. And this is one of her favourite toys that I put out in front of her, and she liked reaching out for it.
Okay. The other thing, I guess, about engaging with communities, and Christian's touched on post-COVID, what we'd found post-COVID is that many of our families were really quite reluctant to go beyond their front door. We'd spent about 15 months telling people what a scary place the world was, and then suddenly expected them to embrace. So we talked to our museum service. We're very fortunate in Bradford that we have 4 museums that are very welcoming of local communities. 2 or 3 of them have beautiful parklands around them. So in order to kind of hopefully reassure families that being outside was perfectly safe. We wanted to offer them something that was very accessible. So we organised sessions of about 45 minutes. We called them Walk, Talk, Discover and Draw, because most families feel, well, I can walk and push my pushchair. I can chat to other families. It might be quite nice outside after lockdown. We can discover some of the hidden places of those parklands. So there's a tunnel that's usually locked up and gated, which they unlocked for our group. And they can draw. We engaged with a community artist and we took a trolley of treats to each of these events. And there were bubbles to blow and chalks to use and all sorts of exciting, interesting things, including water pistols that went down very well in the summer. And we escorted and supported groups of parents and grandparents and carers and their babies and toddlers to get out and about more. Now, the agenda of the museum service was that they wanted to encourage families who didn't feel confident about going behind those rather splendid doors. Was a museum a place for their baby? Was there going to be somewhere where they could make sure that they could change or feed their baby? Were they going to be made welcome? So on the final session of these groups of 4 or 5 weeks, the families would go inside. Now, on the third week in Cartwright Hall, we'd used the bandstand and a massive piece of paper, and all the children and many of the adults made their contribution to the most beautiful piece of artwork. And the following week, that same group were taken into the museum to find their art curated, beautifully displayed on a wall. And I think that is a tangible way to say to communities, you are welcome in these resources. There's nothing mysterious about it. We've undertaken a fairly extensive evaluation, asking users what they think of the offer. And we found that families use a range of the tabs. So within the smartphone app, there's a range of tabs, getting started, words that you might introduce to the children's vocabulary, books that you might borrow from the local library that will further support that activity. And each of those tabs are divided into babies, toddlers and preschoolers. So you can look developmentally which activity and what focus you might have in that particular area. What we find with those several tabs is that some families like some, others like others. We find that families who have English as an additional language want more how-to videos. That families welcome the opportunity to try activities together. So we've come to an arrangement with Northern Rail, who very generously have provided free transport to go into Leeds, to go along the canal and into town, or to even travel to Morecambe for a day at the seaside, which was very exciting. Their agenda is to encourage families who perhaps haven't previously or since COVID used the public railways, to encourage them to go on. Ours is to get families who might see that as a barrier to be able to use that resource. We also find that users want to be able to sift our events posts. So instead of just a long list of events that they might choose to go to this week, next week, they want to be able to sift them. Which ones are free? Which ones are outdoors? Which ones might be fairly easy to organise? And in terms of other future developments, we're working at content, including video. And I will just flag up Sheffield's app in terms of video. Their particular project is held currently by the family learning team. And one of the workers was walking through the woods with her family one day and persuaded them that they should act out the story of Billy Goat's Gruff for the activity, which is trip, trap, trip, trap. So there's a not massively professional, not terribly well lit, beautifully acted, utterly charming video that shows parents the value of something that does not have to be perfect included in the app. We're rolling out 50 Things Primary into other areas. We're going to undertake a second evaluation with users, and we're going to enter into further discussions with funders to roll out into even more areas of the UK. And I'm handing back to Chris now.
Yeah, and I'm mindful of time, so just a couple of minutes with me on these two slides. You know, colleagues on the call will know very well about the Start for Life initiative. And obviously that's a DfE social care and the Department of Health involved in this offer. And their ambition is one that I share, that every family should receive the support they need when they need it. There are 75 local areas who are part of this particular initiative, and we're very keen to connect with those local areas and to be able to support them in delivering on their Start for Life projects and their initiatives in the local area. We're going to be holding a focused 50 Things webinar on that on the 24th of November. I'll ask Keith and the team at Parent Infant Foundation to be able to send out the details of that. Andrea, the next slide, please. I think the most powerful message I would give out about this is that in terms of those local areas who are going to be running with this initiative, just listen to what one of our areas says. We're asking them and working regularly with our current local authority areas who are within those group of 75 to be able to support their bid writing and their action plans that need to be submitted or are being submitted at the moment. In one area, we asked them about it, are they going to be using it? And they just said 50 Things is our offer for early language and the home learning environment. It's written all over it. It's not useful for and could be helpful. It is the offer. And so if you are one of those local authority areas, one of those local areas who's part of this initiative, we think 50 Things is a highly cost-effective offer to be included in that, which will provide, you know, a universal offer for families. It's very strong in providing a way of being able to communicate and reach out within those local within your local areas. Andrea. So if you want to find out more from us, we are a social enterprise. We're not making big bucks out of that. We work from a school with an asset lock. Nobody can be driving a Rolls Royce away because of the work that we do, and we wouldn't have it any other way. We're here to make a difference in communities across the UK. We want to be part of a universal offer. We're particularly keen to make the biggest difference to those children who are growing up in poverty, to make the biggest difference to those children who need support the most. If you want to get in contact with us, there are my details. I'll also put them into the chat. And there are Andrea's. We will be delighted to have conversations with colleagues from across the country to be able to help you have your own 50 things to do before you're 5, featuring your children in your local area, your families, your local assets. We think it's a really good idea, and our partners think it's a really good idea too, and we're ready to talk to anybody. Okay. We've got webinar details. If you just want to have a look at what we're doing, you can send us a message to our info email, or have a look at our national 50 Things to Do website there, which has got, it's kind of like for people new to it. If you want to have a look at the Bradford one or one of the other local ones, then please do that as well. I think that's it in terms of the PowerPoint.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Andrea. That's really excellent. And we've got some questions that have come in. Just before I go to those, if anyone else on this webinar has some questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of their screen. I think just following on from, I think your third to last slide, got a question around how 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 could help close the learning gap for many families created by the pandemic. Have you seen how it's supported or interacted with families to really help in terms of social emotional development, also their other skills and development?
Well, I also think that language, certainly we're finding lots of professionals are saying that babies and children are not quite as far ahead as they might have been in previous years in terms of language development. And 50 Things was based on the premise. So we have 3 criteria for including activities within our offer. And that is that they have to support developing language. And our logic is that if a child of 20 months does something that excites them, they're going to want to chatter about it. And those serve and return conversations are so important. So it gives an opportunity, new experiences for many children that are non-threatening, but encourage that dialogue really between families. Terribly sorry, I'm going to sneeze again.
Bless you.
Sorry about that. Thank you. We're also finding that in terms of some of the professionals that we talk to, finding that children are not quite as far forward in terms of their physical development. So the opportunity and the encouragement to go out, not just to use those outdoor areas, to use the parks, to utilise the green spaces, but also the events page where there might be something. So on Sunday, there was a big event in one of our parks where there was a half marathon for the adults and a slightly shorter run for the older children, but very much a family event to get children out and about, to be much more likely to be being physically active. We also think in terms of encouraging families to be out and about more, to develop those relations between people other than the immediate family. In Bradford, we've got lots of families, households which are intergenerational. So children aren't necessarily limited, though some children were very limited during lockdown with the company that we're keeping, but to extend those social circles, to see other people, to see people out and about. So yes, we think lots of the activities and the way they're being utilised is supporting narrowing that gap that's been created by COVID.
One of the things that I'm able to do through the work I do with Born in Bradford and the Centre for Applied Education Research is see some of the trends in terms of data. And what we see in Bradford is that it is around early language, around fine and gross movement, impacts of those particularly fine and gross motor skills. And we're seeing some issues around well-being, but we're seeing a sharp connectivity between that and children who've been exposed to adverse childhood experiences. And also not just adverse childhood experiences, those children who've gone through some level of trauma, which probably wouldn't fall into the category of having experienced an ACE. And we're seeing within our settings and within our schools impact when we're focusing at those children, looking at the Public Health England early language kind of reports, those children with complex needs who would not be likely to naturally progress when they're just exposed to good teaching. So it is focused impact when you're working with a connected setting. And when you're working with, sustained partnerships with parents, we're seeing impacts with those children who we need to have the most impact upon. And
that's really helpful. Sorry to cut across this. That's really helpful. And in terms of reaching different communities, we have a question in around: do you collect data on the types of background and communities that engage with this set of resources, both the app but the other resources, in terms of ethnicity, sexuality, gender, socioeconomic background?
Yeah, no, we don't collect data on that. The app doesn't actually ask about that particular, but we are very keen that this is a universal and inclusive offer. So we have our enthusiasts in Bradford, many of whom have community languages. We have Google Translate available on the website, though not on the app. And we think that that's possibly why we're seeing as many web hits, not quite as many, but many more web hits than we'd anticipated as opposed to the app. The images that we use on all our materials reflect our communities. And on the events page, we have regular posting of events for an LGBTQ friendly parent and toddler group that runs in Bradford. So we promote inclusion and diversity whenever we can.
Great, that's helpful. I've got one more question, if that's all right, after this.
I'm just going to ask, just to run a quick follow up on that one in terms of that. I mean, the very, very key point that we're trying to do is having an app which responds to local communities. You know, the majority of young children in Bradford are not white British now. So it's really part of the universal offer in Bradford, because actually, you know, it has to be part of it is the bread and butter of what our population is. That being said, we're very mindful of cultural sensitivities and particular approaches which are needed to connect with families who need a particular approach. I'm really back away from using hard to reach phrases and things like that. It's not where we're at all. But if we're trying to work with our communities, particularly those asylum seekers, Roma Slovak families, we know that we need to use a different approach. And the app in itself, the website, is not enough. Those communities typically respond very well to peer-to-peer support from people like them, which is why, for example, within a particularly marginalised community in Bradford, which would be Roma Slovak families, we use Roma Slovak support workers to go and reach out with them, but using the friendly offer, which is 50 Things to Do Before You're 5.
Thanks, Chris. That's really helpful. And just one other question is, you mentioned about parental involvement in the development of the resources, the app, website. Is there a formal mechanism you use, or is it more informal?
It's very informal and it's varied. There is no one way to reach parents. So we regularly attend events like the Science Festival that's run by the National Science and Media Museum, hand out posters, talk to families. We have an annual evaluation exercise where we reach out to users through push notifications, questionnaires. We stand on the step, parent and toddler groups, and collar parents who are going in. And we have consultation groups for groups who are running the risk of being underrepresented. So we have a consultation group for parents of children with SEND, and a consultation group for parents of who have English as an additional language. And we try and encourage on social media comments that come to and fro, particularly on Facebook, and we'll be responsive to that. We don't. I
would say. Go on. Sorry, Andrea. I thought you finished. I would say, as a run-on from this, the most, the best opportunity for this inclusive work is around the co-construction at the very beginning of it. So, we need content. A local area needs content for all of those 50 things to do before you're 5 around community languages, around, the secrets, the local secrets, which need to be included there. But it's a wonderful opportunity to say to a community, we've got this thing, it can look like our local area, but we need your help, and we need you to tell us the things that are going to make it really speak for the wonderful opportunities that, Oldham or, Southwark or East Sussex can provide. And that is probably the best opportunity, because they can build it together.
Brilliant, thank you for that. And one last question. I presume if local areas are interested in developing 50 things themselves, is it best to contact you about timelines and costs and those types of things? Or if there's a magic national funder that wants to see this rolled out across the country?
There is a magic national funder.
Is it a direct contact to you guys?
Yes. Yeah, it can come through to Andrea or myself. Yeah, it's a moderate cost. We've done the hard lifting on this one. That's been paid for by a national charity. But yeah, they can come through to us. And in terms of launch scales and timelines, as short as a month, as long as it needs to be, depends what you want to do and how you're going to launch it. But somewhere between 1 month and 3, depending on the level of community engagement you want, the level of combined work across multidisciplinary teams that you need to have within your local area. We provide the app, the resources, support to get the app to market, and training for your teams as well locally. And we handhold you through all the process to make sure that the technology works for you.
Great. Well, Chris, Andrea, all of our attendees, my colleague Ben for setting up today, thank you all for joining us. It's been really, really interesting. We wish you all the best with all of your efforts and look forward to going away and looking at 50 things to do in primary. So hope you have a lovely day and thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.